Hey everybody, welcome back. Adding text in Adobe After Effects is really easy. Making text that's readable, intentional, professionally formatted, and more requires a little more control. In this video, we're going to create two different types of text, point text and paragraph text, and then format both of them using the character, paragraph, and properties panels. So in this video, we're going to start with a completely blank canvas. As always, go to Window, Workspace, and make sure your canvas is set to the standard canvas. If it's not, go ahead and hit your Reset Standard. Now, After Effects includes several panels for working with typography. We can find those panels within our window. After Effects includes several panels for working with typography, but at first glance, those panels might be a little hard to find. Whenever you can't find a panel in After Effects, you're going to go to Window, and you're going to go through your various windows that you can access. So there's things like the character panel. We'll go ahead and click on that, and you can see it opens up here. And I'm going to just left click and move this out. We can go to the paragraph panel, which adds to our queue. We see the properties panel here. And so we even have the ability to reorganize these by left clicking and dragging. You're going to want to have these up because it's going to help you, especially if you're working with typography and different controls. So let's get started by creating a composition and exploring how to add type to our composition. Not every file in Adobe After Effects needs to be imported into the composition. Some of the things we create, like text, shapes, or other types of vectors, can be actually created right here in After Effects. So we have multiple ways to create a composition, which we've learned in previous videos. I'm going to use the big old button, and I'm going to set this to a preset of HD 1920 by 1080 29.97. I'm going to also make sure that my duration is around maybe 5 seconds. So I'm going to add that 0.05 into that second category and hit OK. But wait, I didn't name my composition. Well, that was done on purpose, but you're going to see this a lot on the ACP exam. So to fix that, we just highlight it and we're going to say point text and hit Enter. So that return key will allow you to go and enter and hit enter again to adjust the naming convention. Let's go ahead and add a bin as always, and we're going to call that comps and drag with our left mouse button the point text composition into the comps composition, and there we have it. All right, now that we have the point text composition, let's move beyond just having a black background. Now, as we focused very briefly in our intro videos, we've only really imported video. We haven't done a lot with different colors or different shapes. As this video is really focusing on what you can create in After Effects, we're going to go ahead and add a layer directly from the After Effects interface. So I'm going to go to the very top of my screen and click Layer. And I'm going to go to the top of my screen and click Layer, New, and you're going to look for the word Solid. A solid is essentially a vector layer. It's going to allow us to choose a background beyond that black. So if I hit Solid, I'm going to get the solid dialog box, and I'm going to type BG for background, make sure that the width and the height is the same, or hit the Make Comp Size button. And in this case, let's go ahead and pick kind of a nice, maybe teal or light blue color. You can also enter any of the RGB or HSB information, but we're going to go ahead and hit OK. That looks great. Hit OK, and there you have it. It has added this layer that is scalable, and we have these layer transforms, much like we would have in Photoshop or Illustrator, to kind of manipulate that. You can see that is now a layer in our timeline, and we're good to go. For the sake of a lot of people being beginners, let's go ahead to the timeline and just lock that layer, just so we don't accidentally select it as we're creating text. The next step we want to do is actually put some text on the screen. Now that we have the background, we're going to go ahead and start with point text. And to do this, you're going to go to your toolbar and select the horizontal type tool. You can see here, if I hold my left mouse button down, I actually have access to a few different type tools, but for this lesson, we're going to focus on that horizontal one. To go ahead and start the process, you're going to left click and start typing. in the screen. Now, depending on where you're at with your different settings, you may have a different font than me, but we'll go back and adjust that. So we're going to type point text. Now you can see mine is in all caps and it uses the new Frank typeface. The good thing about this is you can see the properties panel does display some of the properties that you might use when creating text. And I can highlight my text, I can grab certain parts of the text, I can do things like change the fill. So if I wanted to change the fill maybe to a dark red for the word point, I can go ahead and do that. Another way I can do that is access those panels. So by going to the character panel, it's going to give me very similar features. I can reset that text rather quickly, kind of highlighting my text and going in and selecting the black. You can see it does that. I can double click and I can change the color to the text I see fit. And to do that, you just want to go ahead and make sure that you're highlighting your text as you go. So we want to think about contrast here. So we are going to stick to black as we go. You can see I can scale my text up and down as we see fit. I can also double click on the text, and in that character panel, I can play with things like the tracking, and I can actually open up the tracking for the entire piece. If I want to play with kerning, I would just simply highlight certain points. So maybe these letters here, go over to the tracking element here and pull those apart or together, depending on the look that I'm going for. These are really basic tools, but very helpful. And you can see point text is actually something that if I keep typing and I just kind of go off screen there, it's just going to keep that singular baseline and continue to grow. Other options that you might use a lot when working with typography, especially in the character palette, are things like the faux bold or the faux italic. You can use the kind of drop cap, different elements to kind of transform your text. You also have things like superscript and subscript. Subscript you'll definitely see on the exam. That's when you grab text and you can make it look almost like a maybe kind of periodic table here with the click of a button. But this essentially is your point text. Now, point text, once you click away and you go back to your V or your selection tool, you can kind of move into various places. Point text may be a title. It may be a header. These are things that you're not going to have multi-lines of text with. It could also be something like a lower third. It really depends on the option of what you're creating. As we continue to kind of adjust this, the other type of text is known as paragraph text. Paragraph text is going to be done in a different way. While the point text gives you a singular line, the paragraph text gives you a container to put your text in. If I were to grab my text tool and let's kind of click away from this layer and get the text tool again, and I drag a box, this is what's known as paragraph text. Paragraph text, I can actually enter a couple sentences. So I'm going to type a sentence out. I just kind of pasted one in. You can see it's rather large. So I'm going to hit Command or Control A, and let's scale this down. And you can see that this text is actually kind of has this defined box, which helps for things like the flow of a paragraph. This is a very important distinction because, again, this would be more for what we would call body copy, right? And this is the point text is going to be more for things like titles and headers. So that paragraph text, as you can see, gives us the ability to kind of scale, adjust, and then if we want to work on kind of the flow or the block of the text, we can totally do that and just change our text box with a click of a button. These are two essential elements. I don't necessarily bring in text from other programs, so I don't always bring in text from Illustrator or Photoshop, but I do kind of use this tool to kind of help guide me through. Another really important tool when you're working with typography is starting to look at the alignment tools. Now, the alignment tools are going to really help kind of, as you guessed, align these elements together. And you can align in different ways. You can align to the composition. So if we wanted to center everything in each way, we could do that. We could align specifically to the selection and then just kind of move them up. We can also hit Command R to bring up those ruler guidelines. and we can draw ruler guidelines to kind of define where our type is going to be. These are going to be very important factors when it comes to our projects during a motion design class. Another thing to look into is when you're dealing with that paragraph text is you have multiple lines. This is where leading can come into handy. Leading will adjust the spacing between the lines of text. As you can see, I'm moving my left mouse button over that, and that will adjust accordingly. You have your leading and you have your tracking. The great part about both of these is we can adjust the various typefaces as well. If I wanted to go in here and maybe change this from the New Frank to something a little bit, I don't know, maybe a little thinner, maybe a Noto Sans, we can do that relatively easy. So you have the ability to kind of go through and change your font weight depending on the project that you're trying to create. If I wanted to create a little more typographical hierarchy, I could do that and build out that visual order. Going through and utilizing your different fonts and their font families is going to be an immensely helpful tool for any designer, whether you're an animator, graphic designer, or anywhere in between, to kind of communicate that idea. When dealing with body text as well, we might want to deal with our justification. You can see that we have the various types of justification, but if you are going to use justify all, be very careful because you will get those rivers of text that are in the scene. So I always kind of default to left or right justification whenever I'm creating the different elements. As you can see in closing, we have two different types of text here, and you don't need to have things be imported into After Effects to create or start creating dynamic motion design. Point text works really well for things like short titles, and paragraph text gives you really that control over the wrapping the text and the layout. In our next video, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into actually transforming elements and adding a few basic keyframes. Go ahead, explore the type tool, and experiment with different types, type weights, and their different settings, and have some fun. I'll see you in the next video.